Hello and welcome to the official podcast brought to you by the National Cyber and AI Awards. This podcast is where we dive into the latest innovations, challenges, and success stories in the world of cybersecurity. I'm here with Will Jackson, CEO of C2 Risk. Welcome to the podcast, Will.
Hi, Ellie. Thank you for having me.
It's good to see you again. I know we've known each other for a few years now, but let's start with an introduction from you and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, as you said, I'm Will Jackson. I'm the CEO of C2 Risk. I've been with the business since September 2023. Risk are specifically looking at risks, specifically in supply chains and also around compliance and legislation around cyber and data privacy. So I always like to say that we're kind of like we're a risk audit tool on steroids. I always think that that lands quite well.
I like that. It keeps it nice and informal. In terms of services that you offer, Will, and the types of companies that you work with, what does that look like for C2?
Yeah, so we're a tech company first and foremost. We weren't always. So we kind of moved from a professional services organization before my time, and progressed into being more of a tech fronted. So we kind of replaced professional services with technology, and we've been doing that quite well in all sectors really. We don't seem to have a stronger sector. We've got customers in a variety of different industry verticals, from government to retail, manufacturing, financials. So yeah, we've never really found an industry that we've kind of exploded in. We just seem to have a really nice variety of customers, really.
That's excellent, isn't it? I mean, it stops you from pigeonholing yourself too much as well, doesn't it? It gives you a broad array of clients and keeps it exciting, I'm
Yeah.
sure, for you.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting as well, especially around risk, because different industries, different organizations, they have different priorities of concerns around risk. So manufacturing, it's generally around the availability of things, whereas the organization or industries that deal a lot with personal information, it's around the data security of things. So it's quite interesting to get that different kind of view of those different industry verticals and really what matters to them and what problems they're trying to solve.
What people might not know is that you took on the role of CEO back in 2023. And what was it that led you to taking that position?
Yeah, great question, really, because cyber wasn't really my industry. I've not spent the last 20 years in this space. So yeah, what brought me to a cyber scale up? Probably a decent question to ask, really. So I previously worked in the HR and payroll tech space. So I've always been, I suppose, exposed or aware of the importance of dealing with information security, cyber and data privacy. And throughout my investor channels, really, I got to know C2, and C2 were at a really interesting point in their journey. They'd kind of gone through a lot of say startup phase, if you like, a bit of fundraising, and they kind of really wanted to really start to scale the business, and they felt that getting a kind of experienced CEO or MD into the business would help do that. So I was approached by some of the investors, and it was interesting for me because I'd never really been in a business that is this small,
Yeah.
other than advising on businesses. So I've done a lot of that advisory or non-exec stuff in startups, but I've never actually been in the hot seat. My background is actually large corporates.
Okay.
So I thought it was an interesting challenge to actually jump into a business where, you really are feeling it on your skin every day. And I just wanted a challenge. And I have to look on some of the tough days that, some of the tough days I look back and think, yeah, you got what you wanted. So, but cyber was always interesting to me because, like I say, it's an emerging, well, it's not emerging, but it's a really interesting space at the minute. And especially when you look at, where the internet came from, only relatively new in the last sort of 20, 30 years, that kind of blew out the problem. And then now with AI. So yeah, I think it's an interesting space to be in. I love it actually.
It's really kind of rapidly evolving, isn't it? Like you say, there's always something new and emerging, and maybe in the payroll space, you don't probably have that kind of
I
jumping
don't,
around.
I don't
of
know. It's
different.
really weird actually because I'm getting asked into a lot of these sort of membership organisations and communities to go and talk to them about cyber and data risks in payroll. So it's kind of weird. Like last week, I was at a couple of events talking with this hat on, whereas for kind of 15 odd years, I've been talking with the kind of payroll hat on. So it's really nice that actually those two to kind of offer now a new kind of area of discussion back into what is kind of freshened up a bit. So yeah, no, it's lovely. It's really good actually. So it's not like I left that industry completely. I'm still very much in it, but I'm just discussing a different angle now, which I think in a lot of senses isn't really understood.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that segue from your past experience into now, kind of like you say, with your new hat on, you can give a fresh take on it and stress the importance of cybersecurity in businesses, that focus on payroll or focus on accounting or whatever they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing as well is I came into this without 15, 20 years of being, a cyber expert. And I know in the first few months before I actually joined, I really struggled to get my head around, the stigma of it being cyber IT kind of problem. And once I started to really understood the issue, I think actually one of the biggest challenges we have selling what we do is actually when we talk to people who recognize that they need it, it's actually quite easy, but it's getting the buy-in from the rest of the business that maybe don't have that same appreciation for it. And I think because I've had to kind of almost kind of I've been in that position, I find it easier to then communicate to those say non-state well those stakeholders that are not directly responsible for it. So they kind of almost try and understand that this isn't just an IT problem.
That's really interesting, Will, because I think that's a problem that people raise quite often in this sector is how do you communicate the technical aspects to a board that perhaps isn't technical or a board that perhaps don't sit in this space directly? And
Hmm.
I wonder maybe there's that breakdown in communication and yourself with your background. Now you're understanding the cyber side. You're really probably a perfect person to convey both of those stories because you've
Yeah,
been there.
yeah, because I am still consider myself completely non-technical. So, I use analogies all the time. Some are better than others, but I find that, just trying to translate that kind of more technical discussion into more of a business conversation has been challenging for me even at times because I almost now know too much myself, so I have to kind of step back, 18 months to when I didn't know all the acronyms, or not that I know them all now, but just so I can communicate that a bit better.
I think it is interesting and quite daunting when you first enter the space because, like you say, there's all these acronyms and there's all these organizations, and you think, where do I go and who do I talk to? And
Yeah, and
I'm
everyone knows each other. Yeah, you're the
yeah,
new kid in town. Absolutely. And
yeah,
it's really, you've heard the phrase before, your network is your net worth. When you
yeah.
jump into an industry where you don't essentially have a strong network as a CEO, it's really difficult actually to just to get those conversations in place because nobody knows who you are. Whereas, in my old world, I could pick up the phone and everyone knew who I was. So I think that's been a real challenge, I think, in the role.
What have you found, Will, that's been really useful for you to give advice to others, I suppose, in that sense? If you're new to the industry, you're trying to build your connections in the space, what would you suggest?
I think you've got to some people don't like to be the recognized face of things, right? You get the CEOs who love standing on stage and waving their arms around, and you get the CEOs that don't. And I think if you are emerging into a new space, I think you have to get out there and you have to get to the events, budget allowing, and you have to network and you have to get out that comfort zone and really, really not try and sell something to people all the time, but just try and build the relationships and build that network, but that does take time, and you have to be on the road quite a lot to do that. And obviously, a lot of these events, there's a cost attached to it, which is very difficult for startup scale ups.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that space is very saturated. I mean, this industry, there's always events going on, so it's quite tricky to navigate which one you should be a part of and what's going to
Mm.
drive most value, isn't it?
Yeah, but there are a lot of organizations that are really targeting to help organizations in that kind of stage. Like we're part of Grow London, and they're great. They are designed to try and open doors and connect you with people, and and equally, a lot of there's a lot of free events. You can walk the floor and you can go and speak to your competitors, which I think is also really important. and you can, you can kind of really understand your market. You can go and you can listen to a lot of the talks for free, and there's a lot of material out there if you're inclined to self-learn as well.
I think that's a huge part of it actually, because I remember myself joining the industry thinking, I don't know where to start. How do I learn all of this? When am I going to understand all of this? But actually, like you just said, being inclined to want to learn is the key, I think.
And it's weird because in the daytime, your day job is doing the daytime things. So it's kind of like, in a weird way, going back to school in a weird way, because that spare time you have, you've just got to kind of immerse yourself in it. So I mean, I've lost count of how many YouTube videos I've watched, and how many sessions I've watched back from previous events, and just try to consume the dialogue people use in this industry. It's so different to what I was used to. So, like I say, the acronyms. I've never known an industry vertical with so many acronyms, and it's it's and people talk in acronyms as well. So you kind of you can kind of lose a conversation really quickly because somebody will blind you with. But I've always found that's something I've always done anyway. If I don't understand something, I'm not behind the door coming forward and saying, I don't understand the word you're telling me. Can you just explain this to somebody, to
Yeah.
me, like you're explaining it to like a 9-year-old child? And that seems to work. And it is surprising sometimes how many people speak very complex and very technical. And when you ask them to do that, they really can't. And I think that's also a nice way to build a relationship. And this is, I think, half the problem is a lot of the people in the room understand each other, but actually the people outside of the room who need to understand just aren't getting it. And I think that's that bridge sometimes.
I think that's a great point, actually. And I suppose us talking about events segues us nicely onto your involvement with the National Cyber Awards and
Yeah, that was
I know.
brilliant.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it because you, of course, won the Startup Innovation and Cyber Award for 2024, which is a huge achievement, by the
I
way.
know,
So,
mega.
congratulations. But more so, kind of, what was your experience with the awards? I'm sure awards ceremonies and events obviously play into your wider marketing strategy and that exposure element. But what did it mean to you to be a part of it, Will, and of course to win?
Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose. I mean, as you probably know if you follow C2, we've really embraced awards, and we are quite selective which awards we put ourselves forward to. Like we never pay for awards, and we always try and where we put submissions in, they're to most credible. I think the interesting thing one around the what's called now Start Innovation in Startup Cyber Award. I can never get them in the right order. See, a 9-year-old child there again, you see. But yeah, I think I was on a table right at the back. So I thought, am I a bit cannon fodder at the back? So I thought I'm at a table by the fire exit. And I thought it was a great award. And one thing I noticed was the people also there. There was some really high caliber kind of industry specialists there. Like there was some of our advisory board were there. I knew quite a few people at this point. I'd been obviously in the space for quite a while, but I was at the back table, and I was sitting. I think I was sitting with some people from the police force as well, so that made me nervous being a northerner. I should probably make a joke like that, but I get a lot of hassle from you southerners about it. And when the award came up, I had my phone ready just to take a picture of us being shortlisted because I just thought, which was great being shortlisted. Don't get me wrong, but when I was kind of when we announced we won, I was like it was nuts. And then the worst thing was I had quite a far walk to the front because it was a really busy awards. There were loads of people there, which is always a good sign. So it was good numbers there. So I think the person on the stage, um, they didn't know where I was in the room, so I think they thought we weren't there because I had so far to walk. And it was just brilliant. It was really cool. And the best thing is the team. We get very excited about the awards anyway because the team works so hard in C2, and there's not many of us either. And I think for us to have won that, it was a real. We worked so hard last year. We'd made so many changes at the end of 23 into 24, and then throughout 24, we all just head down, really executing a strategy. We worked so hard to see that come through. It was just amazing. Honestly, it was brilliant. So yeah, sorry, I've probably harped on far too much about
No,
that.
it's nice to hear the kind of impact it has on people because I think us behind the team, we do this year upon year, and there's not many jobs you can do that genuinely make people happy. But hearing the response and
Yeah,
hearing even response from finalists and winners is just it's really nice for us.
Yeah,
And
and just for little old C2, we're like I say, we're all so passionate as well, and we work so hard, and we don't have a big team submitting award submissions. We're all kind of inputting into it, so it must read like 5 people have had a go at filling these awards, but and we do our best, but we're not award submission writers. So to actually for the judges to have recognised that we were worthy of it was just amazing, honestly, chuffed to
you
bits.
know, a lot of it is the substance as well, isn't it? And that just goes to show the testament of your team and yourself doing great work. And that speaks volumes, doesn't it? And I think
Yeah.
I was actually chatting with somebody last week who met you at the awards, and I suppose that's the other impact the awards has, not only winning, but the connectedness that it brings to the industry. Because
Yeah.
this person I was chatting to, he was saying, "Oh yeah, I met Will. We've kept in touch ever since," and I was thinking, wasn't that great? And that individual was actually a finalist in your category. So it also goes
Brilliant.
to show that it's not all just competition and grappling for the same award.
No,
There
no, I
is
don't
genuine,
think it is. I think it's recognition in the space, right? We all can sell our products and services to each other. We all get it. It's outside of that space that's so important, where the people that don't necessarily get it do understand the value of what we're offering. And I've been to a number of events and awards and round tables. The one thing is this industry is really passionate about what they do, and I would say everyone I've met in this industry is working hard the same way we are, and I think there's enough of a market for us all to do very well as well. And I think that's the one thing. It is quite a nice industry to work in.
that's really nice to hear. And I've had the same experience actually. I think people are genuinely wanting to help each other, which
Yeah.
is a nice feeling.
I
But
mean,
I'm sure
the worst thing you can do when you run a business is sell something that doesn't add value to your customers. I just think that's just not my bag. The worst thing for me is working with or the idea of working with a customer that doesn't renew with you, or doesn't see the value of what you're bringing to the table. Because I just think, well, where have we failed? And I don't want loads of customers. I want customers who put me and my team through the ringer. You know, I want more of this. I want more of that. I want better of this. I want better. All of our innovation is customer led. So a customer that tells me what they want, and providing we can deliver it, that's the best relationship surely to have. So that's why we all live and breathe that in C2.
that's the key to growing, isn't it, as well? It keeps you inspired, it keeps you ticking along thinking, oh, what can we do next?
I often say in the sales cycles as well. Look, not we're not that we're really selective who we work with, but at the same light, we want customers who are going to take what we offer and really apply it to their businesses to get value out of it. They're the best customers for us. And if we've got a prospect that maybe just feels like they just need to tick a box, they're just not the best customers for us. And I'll be the first to say that. Just say, look, you can tick a box a lot easier than coming to us.
That's quite nice to hear. And very refreshing actually from a CEO. It's not just all about taking on the quantity of clients, but actually the quality as well. And it's got to be the right fit, hasn't it, for both
Yeah.
client and business.
Yeah, I mean, and if I take the example, we work really closely with our customers, and we have really high net promoter scores from our customer feedbacks, and we're really proud of that because we put a lot of effort into customer success. But the one thing we always see is we have one customer that wants a bit more of this, and what we always do is we take what that bit more of this is, and we speak to our other customers and say, do you want a bit more of this as well? And most of them say, oh yeah, actually, we'd never really thought of that. That'd be great. So actually, in a weird way, we've kind of create a bit of a community with our customers where we can actually say, well, look, this customer's asked for this, and we think actually this will be really applicable to you because we know our customers well, we can do that. And then we can off. So for us, even if it's at our cost developing something, we know that we can repurpose that either to new customers or to our existing customers. So it's a really good kind of a community theory of product development led by the customer. I think that's so cool.
Absolutely. And that's feeding into that overall client retention, isn't it? If you can keep them happy and keep building something that they want to buy into, then you've got a client for another year and another
Well,
year and
exactly.
another.
And if you speak to any salesperson, they will say that the hardest thing is to sell something to somebody they don't know.
Yeah.
When you start that conversation at an event, on the street, at an awards, to actually get it to a point where it's actually a piece of business you've sold, that's really hard to do. And the worst thing you can do is then let it fail on a basic customer service or customer success. The easiest thing you should do is to retain that customer. Once you've gone to all the efforts to sell to them, is
Yeah.
deliver what you sold and then keep them. And you can only keep them if they're happy and they see value with what you're offering. And we're really lucky in that way. We get very little churn in our customer base. So I think we've kind of we walk the walk.
I like that. Good way of putting it. That's a nice lead on to my next question for you, Will. I suppose as a startup, you do experience these challenges and these hurdles, but what would you say that you've had to deal with so far that you've overcome and that you've grown from in the business?
Yeah, I think C2 we call it a startup. I would probably say it's a scale up really. C2's been around for a long time, and there's a lot of history in that, and there's been a lot of progress in that business. Before, I can't take any accountability for C2's early journey, right? C2 went through some of the hardest phases that startups will do, and they went through it successfully. And I think one of the challenges for me, I think, is kind of inheriting that, but also trying to keep the livery of that alive because I didn't found a C2. I joined C2 to scale it. There's a big journey that C2 have been on that previous people in the organization would have been so important to that journey that I've kind of picked up. So I think taking a role on like that, when it's a business that you haven't started yourself, I think that is challenging sometimes. And also being new in the space, I think
Yeah,
I would say the biggest challenges, and trying to change things, but trying to understand why they were like that in the first place before just changing it. I think that's been sometimes quite challenging.
and I think as well, for other entrepreneurs or other directors or other CEOs that take on roles just like yourself, where a business has already been established, what would you say to them? Is it about resilience and perseverance, or what would your take be on that?
I think it's crucially whenever I've jumped into a business, I think the first thing is it's the who's who in the zoo and really understand the people in the business, where their skills are, and sometimes people aren't in the right place, and sometimes they don't know themselves where they'll fly. And so I think it's your job when you jump into those positions to get to know people in the business, see where they'll fly that they might not know yet, and make sure that they can get there. So I'm a real people person, and genuinely, I'm not just one of those CEOs that says it. I live and breathe the guys that I work with, and I think that was one of the I would say the major focuses is who have I got in the business, and where are they best suited in the business, and how do we get them to that point, but not make them feel like they've been pushed into that point. So being supportive.
I love that. I think that's really a really valid point actually, because you might have somebody in marketing that may excel really well in sales, or someone that has a curiosity for the technical aspect that just needs that, like you say, that little bit of support, little bit of encouragement to just take them over that line. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I've got so many examples of that where, everybody in C2 as well is in a very different role to the one that they were in when I joined. And I
wow.
would and even though we there were some significant changes in C2, especially around people, it
Yeah.
was just having that reorganizational structure, that almost simplification, and then making sure that people have the empowerment they needed and the trust in them to kind of get things wrong sometimes, but almost and the clarity of where they're going. So I think having a really clear strategy, I always say, aim for one thing and treat it like sticking a note on a tree a mile away, and just everybody aim for that one thing and walk together to it. And it's okay sometimes to drift off to the right or the left, as long as you know you're drifting. Stop if you know you're drifting, recognize that you are drifting, and then just all align back. Is the note on the tree still right? And if it is, don't drift anymore. If it isn't, then maybe tweak it slightly. And I think you can only do that if everyone's really clear and transparent, and
Yeah.
and clear on what that strategy is, that note on the tree almost.
I love that analogy. I think I'm going to take that one back into my
It's like I say, some are better than others.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think, well, what's next for C2 Where? What's the future looking like for the company? Where are
Yeah,
you
so I
going?
mean, my mandate is really jump in and scale the business. It's been slow actually. 2024 was not as easy to do that as I thought it might be. So I think 2025, well, the end of 24, we welcomed a significant new customer into C2, which was a real game changer for us, and that's opened a lot of doors. And I think 2025 as well, we've really come out of the traps, raging really. So yeah, we've I think for us, I think we're looking at working more with partners as well as direct sales. I think
Yeah.
that's I would say probably the biggest change. But I think a lot of what we did in 2024 was kind of reimagining and a lot of product development. We also pivoted out of that kind of investor led into a revenue led. So we now we live entirely off our revenue. So and that's been really an interesting achievement as well last year. And also we as a result of that we also pivoted into profitability as well. So I think we've kind of grounded the business. We've kind of, like I say, restructured. We've developed a lot on the product, and now we're really, as we've kind of really gone out to market, we've kind of got everything ready now to scale it. So really, all we need to do is sell loads more.
I love to hear that. And thank you so much for sharing all of those insights about C2, the business, the people, and yourself, Will. It's been a pleasure, as always, catching up with you. I'd like to leave this on one question, if you don't mind. Something I
Yeah.
ask everybody that comes on the podcast. Cyber is all about staying a step ahead of the threats, but if you could have one superpower to help you in your role at C2, what would it be and why?
Oh, great question. Horrible question, but great question. I think what I would really want is I think the risks, risk in cyber risk, especially in the supply chains, is massive. I think what I'd really like, if I had a magic wand, I think I'd really like for everyone other than the people that deal with risk in businesses just to have that immediate insight into actually how big a risk this is. So instead of it being the risk people or the IT people barking on about the risks, I'd love the business just to have that little moment where they looked in and went, oh, actually, this is quite a serious problem. We ought to elevate this up the priorities. That would be my magic wand moment.
I like that. That's a different one we've not had before, actually. So, yeah, we'll put that one in the bank. But
I'd like the
like
keys to the Bank of England as well. That would be quite nice.
that is one that we've had before, actually.
Brilliant.
Enough.
At least
Oh,
I was original first, not so much second.
absolutely. Will, it's been a pleasure, like I say. Thank you so much for spending the time and coming on, and hopefully see you again at this year's awards.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I'm sure our audience will enjoy this really refreshing and natural,
Cool.
authentic
I'll hope so.
episode. If you have enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, share on our socials, and we'll catch you again on our next episode. Thank you for listening.